In this video, we'll get started with Angular development. Alrighty, so just a quick refresher here. So Angular is the framework for building modern single-page applications. The main website here is angular.io. This website has the official documentation for the Angular framework, along with a number of very good tutorials. So I highly recommend that you access this website and bookmark it on your web browser. A lot of valuable information there. So let's look at the features of Angular. So it's a component-based framework. It has a clean separation of template coding and application logic. It also has built-in support for data binding and dependency injection. And it also supports responsive web design and modern frameworks. So for example, you can use Bootstrap or Google Material Design or Angular Material and others. Looking at the Angular architecture, as I mentioned, it's a component-based framework, so you can have parent components and child components. These components can also make use of view templates. And you can also make use of directives to kind of customize the behavior of your view templates. There's also services you can create. These are client-side code written in TypeScript. And also there are modules, basically a collection of related components, services, directives, and so on. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at some of the key terms here for Angular. The first one here is a component. It's the main player in an Angular application. A component has two parts. One, the view for the user interface, and then two, the actual class that implements the application logic or event handling for the view. And then we have the view template, which is the user interface for the component. It has static HTML along with some dynamic elements. Next, we have directive, basically adds custom behavior to the HTML elements. You can use it for looping, conditionals, and so on. Then there's the service, basically a helper class that provides the desired functionality, so it can retrieve data from a server, perform calculation, perform validation, and so on. This service is actually code written in TypeScript. It's part of the Angular project. It runs client-side, but it can remotely connect to any external sources as needed. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, a module is a collection of related components, directives, services, and so on. And we'll see all of these different components in some of the upcoming videos. Alrighty, so application UI composition. So we can take our main application, starting here with this main screen, and then we can break it down into smaller pieces. So we can have a header component and also a footer component. And then also along the left-hand side, we could have like a nav bar, maybe some product categories component. Then we could have a main content component in the center, and we could add a product list component to list all of our products. And then also we could have a page navigation component. So this is one example of taking your user interface and breaking it down to smaller components. You have total flexibility, total freedom on how you want to design your application. This is simply one example. Okay, so in terms of application interaction, so we have our Angular project, so we have our user interface, and our user interface can make use of services. These services are Angular components, so this is code written in TypeScript. It runs on the client side, it runs in the browser. These services can communicate over the network to backend systems, so they can make use of a REST API and call maybe a Spring Boot backend or any type of backend to get data from a database. All right, so Angular is the front-end development. Spring Boot can be your back-end development. All of this together makes up a full stack application architecture. Okay, so a bit more about the Angular project. So an Angular project is composed of multiple files. So you'll have HTML files, you'll have TypeScript files, cascading style sheets, configuration files, images, and so on. So a lot of files, and we'll actually see this when we create an Angular project. There's a lot of files that are created, but we'll break it down and we'll cover the key files. Alrighty, so now how do we create an Angular project? Well, the Angular team provides a command line tool to generate a project. And basically what this does, it generates the starter files to help you bootstrap your project. The main website for the command line tool is at cli.angular.io. So CLI is short for Command Line Interface. Okay, so let's get started with the Angular CLI or the Angular Command Line Interface. The first thing you do is install it using the command here, npm install-g at angular/CLI. We can always check the version of the tool by using ng version, and we can also get help on the tool by using ng help. Now, here's an example of how to create a new project with the Angular CLI. So you simply say ng new and whatever the project name is. So here I could say ng new, my first Angular project. And so this will actually create the project, create all the initial files that I can use to get started.